Hello and welcome. We are in conversation today with Dr. C.P. Chandrasekhar, Professor of Economics at Jawaharlal Nehru University, and we are going to be discussing the global economic crisis. How did this crisis come about and where are we standing today?
Well, I suppose, let me put it this way, there are two aspects to this crisis we all know now. One is what was being spoken of initially, which was the financial crisis. And the other, of course, is the fact that now that financial crisis is transmitted to the real economy with its consequences for recession, threats of a depression, increased unemployment, contraction in output, etc. But I think there's one more distinction we need to make, and which is that even when the financial crisis broke initially, the understanding was that this was a crisis which really applied to the non-banking financial sector, to the Wall Street banks, to the pension funds, the hedge funds, the private equity firms. Somehow the impression got around at that point of time that because of the fact that banks were regulated more, that they were outside the crisis. And what we're learning over the last month or a little more is that in fact even this financial crisis, besides the fact that it's transmitted into a larger general economic crisis, that this financial crisis afflicts the core of the financial system, which of course is banking. And I think that is something which in some sense has not yet been understood in full measure.
But the crisis in the banking system itself, does it have roots in the financial system or does it have roots in the relationships that banks had in the real economy?
Yes, I would say it's really the latter. That is, it is the way in which the relationship of the banking system or the banking sector with the real economy evolved over the last 2 decades or 2 decades and a half. But that too was the consequence of changes in banking practice and banking regulation, so much so that we need to come to terms with the fact that what is considered today some kind of an ideal financial sector, which all countries should seek to approximate, which is reflected by the Anglo-Saxon model, the model as it is in the United States and the UK, that this is something which came into existence only in the 1980s, prior to which the United States had a highly regulated banking system. The regulation came in 1933 with the Glass-Steagall Act, and the Glass-Steagall Act was aimed at, one, curbing competition between banks by having regulation of interest rates so that banks were not competing with each other, offering higher interest rates to depositors, so that they could mobilize large deposits at high interest rates, because that would make them go and lend to or invest in activities which are risky but give them high returns to match the higher costs of funds. So to control over that, to control of entry, to control of branch banking, bank branching, and of course also through what came to be sort of essential feature of that system, preventing banks from engaging in activities outside of what is considered the sort of terrain or the arena of conventional banking, and not go into securities trading or not go into areas like insurance. And even when they were allowed to sort of do things like lend to real estate, there were strong limits on the exposure that they could have relative to their advances. So it was a highly regulated banking sector, and this was a sector which many people described pursued therefore a strategy which is termed the buy and hold strategy. You created a credit asset and you held that asset to maturity, and the interest you got from that, in as much as that interest rate was higher than the rate you paid your depositors, you adjusted for your intermediation costs and that gave you your margin. But those margins were not too high.
So many people, including US President Obama, have characterized the crisis as having arisen from two things he speaks of: a set of policies, especially in the last couple of decades, but more a phenomenon of what he keeps referring to as greed. It might be tempting to look at this as a phenomenon of some kind of a human frailty, but what you're saying seems to suggest that it's more a structural problem in the sense of how banks were allowed to operate in the economy, and in an open environment such as that, you had the seeds of this problem.
Yeah, I think it's structural in a very deep sense, because why did the transition occur from what I just described to what is called the originate and distribute model, where banks stopped carrying risks. They created credit assets, they bundled them up, created securities based on that, and sold the securities. They transferred the credit risk out of their balance sheets. And that went on to create more synthetic securities, and finally went and rested with the hedge funds, the private equity firms, the pension funds, the insurance companies, and so on. Now, why did the transition occur? I think it occurred for two reasons. One reason was that there was an inability beyond a point of the United States economy, of capitalism, to continue with what is considered, or what is termed, the golden age, where you had high rates of growth, low unemployment, and low rates of inflation. And this lasted after the Second World War till about the late 1960s, after which we know that inflation became a problem. Now, when prices go up, if interest rates are controlled, it means that the real interest rate which depositors get, that is interest rate adjusted for inflation, gets lower and lower and can even turn negative.
Right.
So depositors then wanted to move out of the banks into some other instruments or some other markets where they could at least get a reasonable rate of return.
Right.
And this threatened the banks,
And
the
therefore
viability.
the banks
So the banks really
changed
started
their-
pressure on the government to gradually relax regulations, to relax the control in interest rates. And we know that finally in 1994, I think there was a Graham-Billy Leach Act which did away with Glass-Steagall.
Efforts are on now for what we know are the bailouts of the banking system, in terms of pumping money into the banks and hoping that the banks will therefore resume. But so far indications are banks have not yet started recirculating these monies into the economy,
Yes,
and they are essentially holding on to
Yeah,
the funds. How do you see this working out?
Yeah, what we're realizing now is when you then go in for this much more liberalized system, where there's lax regulation, where there's just some guidelines, some disclosure norms, some reporting standards, and some capital adequacy requirements, banks begin to behave in a way where they discount risk. They're not bothered about creating more and more risk, which is what happened even in subprime and so on. So you get this huge burden of risk with burst. Now, when that bubble burst, of course, as you say, there was a lot of these assets, what's called toxic assets, which couldn't even be valued because nobody was willing to buy them.
Quite.
And without trading, how do you price them? Now, initially, I think the government, both in the United States, UK, and also in Europe, tried to see this merely as a liquidity problem.
Right.
You just got to pump money
Pump
into
money
the system.
into it and things will
perhaps
work
even
out.
give money against these toxic assets. The Fed said that, okay, you give me this paper which people seem to think is worthless, and I, at some par value, would give you. Now, what became clear is that this was not the real problem. The problem was not just that the
Was
credit
not a
price was low.
liquidity problem. Yeah.
It was a problem of solvency.
Right.
So finally, now what the governments are beginning to do is to take positions in the large banks, and by the large banks we mean the really large banks, Citigroup and Bank of America and Royal Bank of Scotland and Lloyds, etc., where they are being forced to buy into common equity. That is, they're actually making the bank solvent by building their basic equity base, which means that the government is buying up basic equity. So in essence, we are nationalizing them. We are nationalizing these banks through the back door.
Of course, in Europe and the UK, nationalization is not such a dirty word as it is in the US. They do it more openly.
Yeah.
In the US, you've got now.
In fact, in Europe, a lot of the banks were publicly owned for a long time.
Exactly, were publicly owned. But in the US today, the US is now holding something like 80% of AIG.
That's right.
But there is no talk of a role in management or.
Or they're trying to still hold back. Yeah, but I think that, if you see this nationalization as being the inevitable resolution of the contradiction between private banking and regulation, leading to liberalization, which creates the crisis and forces nationalization.
Yes.
What you're really saying is that somehow maybe capitalism, including US capitalism, has to come to terms with the fact that even if you're a capitalist economy, the core of your financial system, which is the banks, have to be owned by the state if you really want stability. I think that's the lesson which is coming out.
Great. I think that's a very good point at which we can conclude this first part of our discussions. I'd like to resume the discussion on a slightly different note.